I think we can all agree the timing on the transfer portal window is the worst. And while Jimmy Rogers has put together a very impressive portal class, it would be significantly better if the window were moved to a time that actually made sense.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Morovitz. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today's show is entirely centered around the transfer portal. We're going to go ahead and start with why the transfer portal needs to be moved and how it directly impacted Jimmy Rogers and Iowa State and the team we're going to be fielding next season. Then we're going to pivot into, where is Jimmy Rogers right now? How is with the portal closing today? I know players technically can still join Iowa State, but they won't be able to enter the portal. What does this mean for Jimmy Rogers and co moving forward? Then in the final segment, Christian Rao joins me to talk about basketball moving their transfer portal and why it actually makes sense, why football might need to follow suit. He's got a hot take in there too, so be sure to stick around for that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. All right, I think it makes a lot of sense to start here with the concept, with just cementing the idea that I think we all agree the transfer portal window right now is at a terrible time. I mean, the transfer portal closes today, and the national championship game is not until Monday. So the portal where players can jump in and then, leave their school and then join another school actually starts and stops before the football season is over. Okay. And that's kind of the main point of this whole segment. Obviously, it was spurred by basketball moving theirs, which we'll talk about in the third segment. But we have to lay the groundwork, right? We have to start, it does directly impact Iowa State, but the concept of when the portal is not necessarily something Iowa State controls, but we have to really understand that this timing is just straight up terrible, just plain and simple. It doesn't make any sense. If nothing else, at least extend the portal window until like Wednesday of next week, right? If nothing else, to at least accommodate for the guys playing on the national championship teams. Weird, very weird that they ended the portal before the season is even over. So I think we can get that out of the way. The portal window right now is the worst. But why was it kind of not ideal for Iowa State? Well, there's a couple trickle-down effects and there's a couple direct impacts. Let's start with the direct impacts. Because the portal ends before the season is over, that means it starts, well before the season is over, right? And they at least made it one portal window, which I do think was a step in the right direction. I just think they timed it wrong. And with Jimmy Rogers coming in, effectively the 5th of December, it was a little bit after that. I think you could maybe make the push for like Monday would be the first full day of Jimmy Rogers' time at Iowa State, the Monday after that whole debacle. The transfer portal comes really, really quickly. And I'm not saying that, Jimmy Rogers had absolutely no time. I'm not saying that. He had about a month or so before the portal opened up. It's just that it could have probably been more, right? It probably could have been a month and a half. And those days are precious moments, right? Because you're just watching film tape on everybody. And unfortunately, it's impossible to consume more media at a faster rate. Like you can only watch so much film in an X amount of time, right? And then 2X amount of time is 2X the amount of film. It's not like 4X the amount of film, but it's more, right? And so in just, a couple of weeks, even if you just open the portal, the day after the day after the national championship ends, or however you want to choose it, even if it's just 2 weeks, it's more time for guys like Jimmy Rogers who are brought into these programs to evaluate talent around the nation. Now, of course, I'm sure there was something, Jimmy Rogers was going to be evaluating talent for Washington State anyway. But that is one of the main points that I have here is more time would have certainly been beneficial for Iowa State. And then there's actually an argument that you could push it off even further. And I understand that like class schedules and all of that, like the actual academic side is really what's kind of hanging this whole thing up. But if it were to be pushed until, say, May, right? Obviously, spring training or spring ball is involved here, but if it were to be pushed off even further, that would be just a ridiculous amount of time for Jimmy Rogers to prepare. If it were pushed off a little bit further, even past the spring ball time, I think you could make the argument that Jimmy Rogers would keep a few guys around, some meetings, this, that, and the other. I think that's a valid argument as well. But one of the indirect impacts that I wanted to bring up of the portal being when it is essentially is kind of what it comes down to, is that because of it being during the playoffs, there are players on those playoff teams that it makes it very weird for entering the portal. And to understand this point, you need to kind of it makes more sense in basketball terms, right? In basketball, the scale of the team is much smaller. There are less guys on every single team. So when the portal opens up, a guy that has to wait 2-3 weeks just is really in a bad spot, because every other team that has to fill their roster does so quickly that even if you have a number one talent guy joining the portal late, he just can't really be picked up the same, or if not at all, by these other teams because they've already filled their rosters. That's kind of the point I'm going at here. So these teams in the college football playoff with guys entering the portal, they're going to be highly sought after guys, if nothing else, besides the point that they are on these highly successful teams. And I look at this the same way that like the NFL free agency kind of goes on, where you've got guys on winning teams that get waived or get released, picked up and put on the practice squad of other teams just so they can learn what's going on in that facility. How do you win? Like those kinds of things. In college football, it's not necessarily getting inside the building as much as it is bringing in a guy who has been on a winning team, understands winning culture, and hoping that it could infect your locker room and make it yours a winning culture. And obviously those are talented players as well. They were on those teams, and depending on the reason that they leave for, that's going to alter, kind of the argument there. But nonetheless, those level of talents aren't joining the portal until after it opens. And that's what makes this whole thing so tricky. When you're trying to fill a roster, do you fill that roster spot, or do you wait and see if somebody's going to jump in later? That's effectively where this hurts Iowa State. And if somebody jumps in later, they can, be picked up by somebody else, which would open up another position. There's this whole domino effect. So maybe the guy jumping in doesn't directly join Iowa State, right? I understand that there might not be, if Fernando Mendoza had an extra year of eligibility and jumped in the portal after this year, like, would he choose Iowa State? I would have to guess probably not, right? The odds would be no. But Fernando Mendoza jumping in the portal would affect somebody else, which would affect somebody else, which would affect somebody else. Maybe someone else isn't looking for a quarterback anymore, and that team that would have hypothetically been looking for a quarterback was the destination that somebody else was deciding between that destination and Iowa State. I know it gets tricky. We're looking at a massive spiderweb domino effect here, but I do think it all plays a role. And what it all comes back to is the fact that this portal window is the worst. So to put a bow on this whole thing, Iowa State has done a very good job. Jimmy Rogers has done a very good job. This transfer portal, they have put together a very solid class. And next week, we're going to dive into why exactly this class is so solid. Plenty of times we'll look at specific positions and the whole thing. But there is something to be said about if they had more time, or if the process actually made any, ounce of sense, they could have probably put together a better class. And for, Jimmy Rogers and crew, this is a very crucial time for, Jimmy Rogers and him personally, but also for the program, for Iowa State as a whole. This is a year that I am going to stand on the hill has to be relatively successful. It just has to be. And I think they've done a good job. I think they've set themselves up nicely. But man, imagine if the portal actually made sense. I don't know if we'll ever get to live in that reality. Basketball has it figured out, though. We'll talk about that later. Before we get to that, though, we do have to talk about, now that the portal's closed, what does this mean for Iowa State? Big things. I've got a couple hot takes coming your way right after this. But first, a word from our friends over at FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here is what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. So if you're going to ride with the favorite, ride with the team that you think controls the matchup, take a shot on the underdog if you can just sense that that upset coming, 6 cents there, or if you're going to build a parlay around the players in the moments that you think decide the game, you can go all of those different routes or maybe all together, and then you can apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long, so visit FanDuel.com to get to your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. I can't wait to get into what the next few weeks, months are going to look like for Iowa State now that the transfer portal has closed. But first, I just want to make you thank you for making Locked On Cyclones your first watch or listen every single day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our Everydayer Club. It's $5 a month or $50 a year. It's an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cyclones, and it gets you access to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Definitely just super appreciative of every single one of you guys. So wanted to let you know about this that we're doing here. LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer on the screen. Another link in the show notes or description down below. All right, Iowa State has been busy since really the Matt Campbell situation went down. But since Jimmy Rogers got on board, man, there's something in my eye, which is awesome. Since Jimmy Rogers got on board and basically found out that he wasn't going to have a team on the field next season, he has been, I would be okay with guessing he's probably slept about 10 hours since he was hired. And I need about 10 hours a night. So I don't know how he is doing it. But he has been very, very busy. And now with the portal closing today, what does that mean for Iowa State moving forward? Well, keep in mind, the portal closing doesn't necessarily mean that Iowa State can't pick up anybody anymore, right? They can still bring guys into their building. It's just about guys entering the portal, right? That's what the portal closing means. However, now Iowa State has an opportunity to kind of pivot their focus. When the portal opens, and what we just talked about, right? When the portal opens, it is a sprint. It is an absolute all-out. I mean, I don't even think like 100-meter, too long. That's too long of a race. 60-meter, probably too long. 50-yard, too long. 10-yard sprint? Is it a 10-yard sprint? Or is it closer to like a 5-yard, right? A pro agility, if you will, like a quick sprint turnaround. It's much closer to a 10-yard sprint. If you aren't getting players, it's actually pretty similar, if you can remember, to registering for classes in college. If you're not refreshing the page in the next 0.2 seconds, you're not going to get classes. I don't know what to tell you. You're going to end up taking underwater basket weaving. Like, that's the only time slot or class that's available for you. Sorry, try again next semester. That's kind of what happens with the portal here, right? Technically, you can still register for classes for days after your registration date opens up. But if you're not active immediately, you are going to pay for that, right? Same thing with the Cyclones here. They had to act quickly in the transfer portal. And now that kind of era, that few sprint window is closed, now we can pivot towards what's coming down the pipe. And I am super excited for Jimmy Rogers to get this team into the building, start to develop his own identity, start to really implement, meet with the guys, film. I know that it's not the same as in season, but Jimmy Rogers and co and everybody he's hired is going to be able to, take a second, get onto the same page, breathe. Everybody's going to be able to implement their schemes, communicate with each other. We are now finally getting into the era, the time, or at least the time period where Jimmy Rogers and everyone involved, and I don't just mean like OCDC, wide receiver, D-back coach, special teams coordinator, like not just those guys, even like guys or gals who are working in the front office, scheduling, recruiting for next season is at a different kind of period now as well. Equipment manager, like everything around the program now can kind of collectively let out a sigh of relief. And so now Jimmy Rogers can start to finally build that culture a little bit, right? It's not just chaos and sprints. And if he can get some sleep in, it might help as well. I think that this is maybe the most important, as far as what this team is going to be outside of actual roster construction, period, on the entire schedule. I mean, this is really where you have to hunker down, and Jimmy Rogers gets to be Jimmy Rogers, the coach, as opposed to Jimmy Rogers, the recruiter or the transfer portal wizard that he has been. He's done a phenomenal job so far, but it really comes down to now it's the personal side. It's not the X's and O's. It's the Jimmys and the Joes right now, if that makes sense. So, we're going to get, he's obviously met with the team the first day that he was in town, but a lot of those guys are gone. And it's a totally different look now. Everything is different. I don't know if there's going to be changes that he'll make, immediately. I would assume so. And to set the tone right away. But nonetheless, he can at least breathe and kind of think. That's the biggest thing. Actually have time to have the cogs turn a little bit and put the pieces together and build what this whole thing is going to turn into. Obviously he's looking forward to spring ball, to summer conditioning, and the guys getting back to classes. I don't know what the first day of class is. It's usually right around halfway through February or through January. So very, very soon here, they're going to be back in there. And this is where we really build the team. We've constructed the team. We've put the scaffolding up, essentially. Now we put the drywall on the building, right? We put the shingles on the roof. And then we can move into next season. So that's what's kind of right here, right now for Iowa State. It's not as exciting as, getting 6 to 8 commits every single day and getting to take a look at what are the new names that are going to be on Iowa State's roster next season. Although we will take a look at the guys who are on this, new transfer portal team kind of roster, if you will. Obviously, we know what Kyle Conradi is capable of, but as we take a deeper look into all the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, safeties, running backs, all that we're capable of doing, we will do that. But now it's just a different time period for these guys, and they're going to be building something from the inside out now, as opposed to slapping everything together in that crazy portal window, which I still think is at the wrong time, personally. It's just me. I'm not the only one. Christian Rao believes the same thing as well. It needs to be moved, but what does he think? We're going to talk about that coming up right here after this. How does that compare to the college basketball window, which is going to be changing? It's all going to tie together very, very nicely. So don't go anywhere. Christian and I are breaking it down coming up right here after this.
Let's finish off this show right here with a Farmageddon Friday, as we always do to end the week. Nick Maravets, Christian Rao here, Locked on Kansas State, Locked on Cyclones. And look, it wasn't the greatest week of college basketball for either of us. You got your first loss of the season. Wasn't the best. It was not the best at all in Lawrence. No. On the other side of it, there's nothing that I can basically make any kind of jokes about. Kansas State has yet to find a Big 12 victory. So it's not been the best week for college basketball for either of us. But the NCAA college basketball finally did something right. They did something right. And I'll talk about it today on this episode of Farmageddon Friday to end out this show of either Locked on Kansas State, Locked on Cyclones. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we have fun doing this, as we always do every Friday. The NCAA approved the new transfer portal window for multiple sports on Wednesday. And the biggest thing, of course, we're going to talk about is men's and women's basketball. Now, last year was a headache when it came to the transfer portal. They had the portal open during the tournament. Of course, that meant more for you than it did me last year, but still, it was a big deal. Now it's going to open after the national championship games. For the men's, it's going to open from April 7th to April 21st, the day after the national championship game. Same with the women's, just a day before, April 6th to April 20th. It's only a 14-day period. There will also be some other periods if a coaching change occurs. We'll get to that in just a second. To put that in perspective, last year the transfer portal opened for 30 days after the second round of the NCAA tournament, March 24th to April 22nd. You've heard analysts like Dick Vitale talk about how bad it was. Tom Izzo, the head coach of Michigan State, was very vocal about it last year, criticizing the timing of the window. The NCAA got this one right, didn't they?
There was just no reason for it to be as wrong as it was, to be completely honest. I don't really know what took them so long and what they thought last year's idea. Like, what about that was a good idea. I don't know, but luckily they figured it out. Just put it after the national championship game. And you talked about like it didn't really matter for you because you weren't in the tournament. Well, in some ways it still did, because hypothetically speaking, what about the players that are on those teams? Let's say one of them wanted to come to Kansas State. How do they handle that situation? Maybe they're persuaded not to because of the way that the portal is set up. And I'm not necessarily saying that that was the case, but I am just kind of talking about it doesn't just affect the teams that are in it. And obviously, if this would have been, in the second round this year, I think Iowa State would have been impacted quite heavily, because I do believe, even after that loss in Lawrence to Kansas, that Iowa State's going to be an Elite Eight, a Final Four level team. And so how does Otts go about building that team for next season when they're currently playing? And, it's a whole mess. And it's the same thing with football. Like, why is it the way that it is? Seems like they finally got it right here. And we can actually, like, we're taking baby steps towards college athletics making some sort of sense from what it's been.
Yeah, I'm with you. This one stung to me. This one stuck to me, I should say, last year. And I know it's not Iowa State, it's not Kansas State, but it's somebody very prominent in the sport, and it's Tom Izzo. When he was making his run last year to the Elite Eight, and they were talking about obviously the portal being open after the second weekend, he said there's nothing on his mind but giving these guys a chance to win one more game to get to the Elite Eight, talking about his current roster. He said, win one more game, have a memory that'll last their entire lives, their kids' lives, their grandkids' lives, because that's what matters most. Tom Izzo has been a very vocal part and one of the most prominent coaches in college basketball for years now. He talked about how it's not fair. He's not going to talk about the transfer portal. He said it's not fair. It's not fair to the people. You can say it's not fair to your program. He's going to run his program like he wants to run his program. People have a disagreement with them, fine. He also said, God bless them at the end of it. But, I mean, what I'm getting from this, what I got from this last year, what I still get from this, is that he was completely right, is that you should not have to be worrying about focusing on next year's team when there's still a mission to do, when you are games away, mere games. In this case, you're getting to the Elite Eight. You're 3 games away from being a national champion, but then you have to split your attention on focusing for the transfer portal for next season, because God forbid, if you leave just a couple hours away from the portal, we saw it happen in college football this year, how fast people went after players in the portal. Indiana had a hard time. They said they were having a hard time prepping for Oregon. Obviously, it didn't matter for college football, but that they had to split their time. For college basketball, I think it's even more important because you don't have 105 people on your roster. You have to get every single portal piece right, or you're talking about a team that makes the Final Four, or you're talking about a team that might get invited to the crown. That's how different that might get if you don't get that right. So I love what Tom Izzo did here, stuck up for it, and the NCAA did a really good job at moving this till after the national championship.
Absolutely. And part of it too, like we talk about the football side of things, the portal closes on the 16th, right? The portal closes today. When's the national championship? Is it today?
No. It's on Monday.
No, so it's already happened then. Oh, no, it's in the future. Oh, wow. So the season isn't even over yet and the portal's closing? Oh, that makes complete sense. This makes the most sense to me. It has to be after the season, which is like step one. Okay, once the season is over, now you can move between teams, which I'm not even saying that the system is completely fixed as it is, right? It's definitely not perfect, but at least we're stepping towards now that the season is over, you can leave, as opposed to you've got to decide, like for the coaches, building a team mid-playoffs is very challenging. I don't know how that would even be possible. But for the players, what about the guys that know that they aren't going to be on this team next season for whatever reason? If it's money, if it's the construction of the roster, if the team itself is planning on bringing in someone who's going to play ahead of you, or if you just don't gel with your teammates, and even if you're getting playing time, you'd rather be somewhere else where maybe your buddies from high school ended up all go. Like, who knows what your reasoning is? How do you go about entering the transfer portal when you have a national title game before the portal closes, or in college basketball when you're in the round of what would that be, the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight or whatever, because you have to get in there right away. It's not like you can wait. Other teams, as soon as that portal opens, are filling those roster spots like you just talked about. It's not even about they'll come and get me if I'm good enough. They're going to be completely full. Whether or not they want you is no longer a question mark because they don't have any roster spots. They literally had to act the second the portal opened up, And over, in football, 10,000 players are in the transfer portal. In basketball, I don't have the exact number of what it was last season, but a ton of guys, they have to make their decisions immediately because otherwise they'll get picked off. Their roster's full and you don't have anywhere to go. So you have to jump into the portal mid-playoffs. It didn't work. This was the right play. I don't even understand why there was any holdup or why we didn't start with this, but at least it's fixed now.
April 7th to April 21st works for college basketball because it's after the national championship game and it's before almost every university starts their spring semester or summer semesters or whatever the case may be. It sets them up perfectly for the next academic year. Let's switch focus here. Why can't you have the exact same portal window for college football? We already had a spring portal window last year. They want to move to one. That's fine. Why don't you just make it April 7th, April 21st, the exact same time? Would we be busy covering basketball and football in the portal? Absolutely, we would. Would it suck for content not being able to talk about portal things in January? Sure. But you wouldn't have the Indianas, the Miamis of the world having to focus about, hey, the portal closes the 3 days before the actual natty. And you would have your decisions, you'd have your team that loses eligibility, and you'd also have the decision factors on if players are leaving for the draft or not, because the draft happens around the same time in the middle of April, towards the end. You still have the opportunity, if you ran this right now, I think the NFL draft this year is April 23rd, if I remember correctly. April 7th through April 21st, if that was the way that the college football portal was open the exact same time, players could still enter the portal if they wanted to. They could decide if they want to go to a different team. If they don't like how the portal looks for them and they're on the fringe of whether going to a new team in the portal or entering the draft, they would still have an opportunity to do so. There is no reason in my mind whatsoever that there is now. I felt completely different about this last year and 2 years before. But now, after making this change right here with college basketball, we should have a universal transfer portal window and it being in April for both college football and college basketball.
Yeah, I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. I really don't. I don't have the fix for you. I think you have a much stronger opinion on this than I do. I would argue that their schools and coaches are going to want these guys on campus as soon as they possibly can, and this, that, and the other. And we didn't even really touch on like mid-year transfers are no longer a thing at the basketball level. And it's just like there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack. And so it is a tricky question like to answer, and I don't have the answer, but I do know that opening the window mid playoffs and closing it for football mid playoffs literally does not make sense. So at least the way I'm viewing this is there as at least a step in the right direction. There is at least an acknowledgement of like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have the portal open only during the playoffs. Like we should move it till at least after the national championship game, take some stress off the head coaches that are playing, take some stress off the players that have to figure out whether or not are they going to be able to finish out their season. If they're going to transfer, like what does that all look like for them? This is at least a step in the right direction. Then we can start to tackle what is the actual window? What's the timing on that window for football? I think for basketball, this is almost perfect. Like this is just about exactly what it needs to be. How long the window is, I feel like, 30 days is kind of long. If you're not jumping in the portal right away, I don't know what the difference is between 2 days to 14 days to 30 days. So, like all those kinds of questions are going to be answered. I just feel like we've at least acknowledged the problem. That's step one. And now we're starting to work in the right direction.
A lot of things to cover in the upcoming days for sure. Upcoming weeks for sure. Could you imagine though, that if you had the portal at the exact same time for both basketball and football, obviously your two biggest sports when it comes to revenue, with this new $20.5 million cap where you have to split up between the sports anyways, you just focus on one window at splitting that money in the right directions.
True.
I mean, to me, it just seems like there's a lot of pros to put it all in one spot, and I can't think of hardly any cons in the right direction other than the fact that you're right. January, February, and March, you wouldn't have all 105 college football players on your team that you were expecting to have that next season. But you get a deeper look. Really. That's the only negative. But you get a deeper look. Maybe you get less people hit the portal. Maybe you wouldn't get 30-something people hit the portal because you get a deeper look at your team and development might come back into play again. It could be the Band-Aid to help fix college football
in the right direction.
Exactly. So what are we doing here? That's where from here on out until it changes, which it won't, because we just gave credit to the NCAA for doing something right. So that means they got to do at least 5 things wrong before they do something else right for the next couple times. But until then, that's what I'm sticking my guns on. is college football needs to move their portal to the exact same time. To me, it just makes perfect sense.
I mean, yeah, I think it does make a lot of sense. I certainly do. But like I said, one step at a time. One thing going correctly for the NCAA is like winning the Super Bowl sometimes. I mean, we just got to at least acknowledge where we're at.
Let's get on out of here. Thank you so much for watching the show. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Locked On Cyclones or Locked On Kansas State, your team every day, part of the #1 sports podcast network in the world, the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll see you back here on Monday. Take care.